So, my name is Alexis, and today I'm going to talk about something quite unusual, I will say, for conferences. Because even though that we are at 2024, I'm going to introduce you to Scala 277. Has anyone in the audience ever used the Scala 27 here? Come on. Really?
Not yet, no.
Okay, we had two guys, and it's more than expected, so that's good. To remind yourself, Scala 277, it's already 15 years old. It's ancient technology in the Scala world, which is only 20 years old, so this is 15. And it was also way, way different than Scala 3, or even Scala 213 is way, way too different. So we're going to talk about something that I got from a customer a while ago. I do a lot of contract work, freelancing gigs, and that kind of stuff. And there was a time when someone came to me sharing that he needed to compile a very old application that happened to use Scala 277. This was last year, in 2023. So the whole idea is like, let's take this old project, help me to compile it, help me to build a fat jar, and make sure that it runs with JDK 8. Those were the requirements by this customer. The project I'm talking about is called Kestrel, one of those many projects that are at the Twitter graveyard. And even though this Kestrel project had like a more up-to-date version, the truth is that I was specifically asked to compile the branch that you see right there. And as you can see, it's marked like updated 13 years ago, but it was used like a README or something minor like that. So the presentation is all about what have I done in order to get this customer request succeed, and all the pain that I felt when I was doing that. So for every sane person that has worked with Scala, it's very likely that when you get into a Scala project, the first thing that you are going to do, look for the build.svt to see what I'm actually facing. What are the dependencies? Are there any external repositories? What are the configuration, the plugins, etc.? But wait, this project doesn't have one. There is no build.svt. For the few people that raised your hand, you might remember that back then, the project structure was different. Build.svt didn't exist, and at the project, the build.properties file that you see here, where we tend to specify only the SVT version right now, back then, we could also specify the Scala version and a few other details like the one that you can see there. But anyway, what matters from this is that this is dependent on an ancient Scala and SVT version, SVT 073 and Scala 277. Let's ignore everything else. There was also another build file that I was able to find called the Kestrel project.scala in an unusual location for what we are used to work with right now. And this is more similar to what we have saw at the build.svt. Here you see an external artifactory. We see also the library dependencies that the project has, the main class, and blah, blah, blah. That's basically, that's how it looked, but we can map it to what we know. So what do we get from these initial insights? Well, first of all, you saw that there is no build.svt, but still we can derive what are the library dependencies. We can derive what Scala version, what SVT version should we use. And there was also another interesting thing. The SVT documentation for this ancient version is already is still alive. We can go and see the documentation. It was helpful. You might see later why, but it's helpful to know. And one hidden detail is that JDK 6 is necessary for compiling this. And why? Well, because even though JDK 6 is pretty old, with Scala 277 and SVT 073, it was released way before Java 6, sorry, way before than Java 7. So we had to use Java 6. But the problem with Java 6, how do you get it? SDK man doesn't have it anymore. I have no idea why. But last year, at the end of 2023, you could just do SDK install and Java 6 something, and you could get the binary, and which is pretty nice. But right now, at 2024, because I tried this a few weeks ago, you cannot get it anymore from SDK man. So I went believing that Oracle, with that download page, might be able to help me. I had filled the registration form. I had agreed to receive the marketing emails from them, because otherwise they are not going to allow me to download the file. And once I do all of that, I get the not found error. So getting JDK itself is not a simple task, but I am not going to get into that right now. That's your own challenge. So what are we going to do? How are we going to proceed with this? There is a small trivia here. What do you think? Who believes that SBT is not going to launch if we try using the launcher from 2024? Who believes that it's going to refuse to launch just because the 073 is too old? No one. Well, that's good. I guess everyone else is thinking that SBT is going to load but generate a new project because there is no build.SBT. Well, the truth is different, because SBT actually give it a try to download SBT073, but the shell was not available anymore. So if you look, I'm not sure if you are able to read, but if you look, for example, it's trying to resolve this from Sonatype, from Maven Central, from the local repositories, but it couldn't find it. So there is no SBT there. Let's see what else we can do. Well, I managed to find this ancient SBT version and an old archive from Google Source something, where you can find all the jars for the SBT launcher. And for the ones that are new to Scala, we use it to call this a simple build tool, by the way. Simple. So I have downloaded the file, I have tried to launch SBT, and guess what? I got another problem. This time, it's complaining about something very similar, but the error message is slightly different. This is placing something that it's not able to resolve, SBT073 or Scala 277. Okay, the cursor is here. So the error is different. And we get a little bit more information as well. What you can see there is that there are a few more repositories that SBT is trying to fetch the data from. Not only Maven Central, not only Sonatype, there are a few other places. For example, this databinder.net, scalatools.org, and there are a few other places where these files used to be hosted. So what we can get from this is that many of the things that were alive before, they are not alive anymore. Does anyone remember the issue that we got a while ago related to bin tray, when bin tray was sunsetting? Anyone? Only a few? Lucky you. Well, we had the bin tray problem before. At least there are 2 repositories right there. And from the few of you who has been in the Scala ecosystem for a long time, you might notice that Maven Central right now requires HTTPS. But in the previous slide, you can see, where is? You can see that SBT was trying to reach to Maven Central through HTTP. If you try that, it's going to reject. So what does it mean? It means that SBT might be at Maven Central, but given that Maven Central refuses to attend this request, we don't really know, and we cannot do anything about it. So I'm not going to be able to find this SBT version, because there are 2. One is the launcher, one is the shell. The launcher is there, but the shell is not there. So forget about it. What if we compile it instead? The source code is there. It took me a while to find it, but the source code is there. So what if we compile SBT073? Well, I mean, I gave it a try. Why not? Well, let's look into the project, and it requires SBT072. with Scala 277. So I was being paid to compile a Scala 277 application, which also requires me compiling SVT with 277. So what are we going to do there? The truth is that I actually give it a try. I started trying to compile the SVT shell. I'm not detailing all of this in the slides, but I did try it. And it got me to the rabbit hole because I had to compile JNA and a few other ancient libraries that I just couldn't actually deal with that. I was very annoyed. So let's just ignore all of that and forget about compiling SVT. So what can we do now? Idea number one, we could upgrade the project to use a sane SVT version, something that we can actually download. And when I was reaching out to people at the Scala Discord, there were people helping me. It was said he's here in the audience. He doesn't remember, but he helped me. And he suggested, have you considered building a tool just for compiling this project yourself, resolving dependencies, mangling with the class path, et cetera, et cetera. And that was a very good idea, which I actually considered. But at the time, I said, nah, that was too crazy. I don't want to build yet another build tool just for legacy projects. So let me try upgrade it to a sane SVT version. So let's drop away, let's take away everything from the build file that we have and just replace it by setting SVT 013 there. That's it, nothing more. And the only reason why I had picked up this version is because it can be resolved by SDK man. That's it. I didn't want it to bother with other stuff. So by doing that, SVT can launch. At least the shell is there, so there is some lag. But when I try to compile, the compilation will obviously fail, and this might be obvious for the Scala people that are already experienced with this kind of problems, because I never added the library dependencies, etc., and the configuration, which was simple. But another thing is that SVT was trying to use Scala 210, which will not actually compile. So if you see here, there at the top, I have updated the build.svt. I had finally created one in order to specify that we need to use Scala 277. But guess what's going to happen then? Another not found error, because this cannot find a Scala 277. So by now, we had faced the problem resolving SVT. We couldn't actually fix it. Now we have the problem that the Scala 277 cannot be resolved. JLine, I don't care, that's a minimal thing. Then looking more into this, I find out that there is a way to let SVT pick a local Scala version, something that you have within your file system, which is pretty helpful. And also the Scala website has most of the versions from Scala from the past, and you can just download the tar file, extract it to your local, and you set it right there. So let me try that. What do you think is going to happen? Is it going to work? The audience is not very positive. Well, it does not, so right answer. But what the hell is this? I didn't know back then, I do not know right now. But what I can tell you is that after trying to find what the hell was going on, it seems that even though SVT 013 is pretty old, it's too new for Scala 277. They just cannot play together. So, what can we do now? Take the inverse path. Start downgrading SVT until we find something that can play with 277. That's one idea. Or the second idea is start looking more appealing by now. Perhaps I should build my custom build tool just for this. I got another idea. What about if I instead upgrade the Scala? Instead of 277, let's go up to see whether I might be able to get it to work with SVT. And that's what I'm going to pursue. I'm going to replace the build.svt. I'm going to change the Scala 277 by 282. And the reason for 282 is because that's like the next version from the Scala 277. I was going to try one, then the other one, then the other one, and to see what's going to actually fix the problem. But to my surprise, I was pretty lucky because we were this far to get the Scala resolved. With 282, I managed to launch SVT shell, and I managed to actually get this thing trying to compile the source code. So finally, something good in the whole presentation. So what's next? We get compile errors, of course, because we didn't have added any dependencies. So let's transform the other ancient build file into build.svt, defining the external repository, defining the dependencies, and let's see what's happened. What do you think? Is it going to work? Such a positivity here in the audience. Well, this is a not found again. You are pretty used to it and get used to it because this is not the last one. So there are many libraries that cannot be resolved. But pay a little bit of attention here. It says specs 2.8.2, something like that. Normally, you will see only like the underscore with 212, 211, or the 3, and that's it. But turns out that back then, with Scala 2.7, every minor version had binary incompatibility with every other minor version. So if you have something for Scala 2.7.6, it was not going to work with 2.7.7. So if you think that you have library problems right now, it's not that bad. Basically, this slide, it cannot work. So what should we do? Who thinks that we should do this? Anyway, so the other idea is maybe we can recompile everything to work for 2.8.2. Maybe if the dependencies are not that big, if there are not many transitive dependencies, maybe we can get that to work, or just do and follow the long path and compile everything manually. So looking a little bit into the dependencies, there are a few dependencies that are already there. Thank you, Java world. We hate Java, but sometimes Java is good. So the Java dependencies work, that's good. But the other 5 libraries from Twitter are gone. They do not work. So analyzing this a little bit more, I had to dig a little bit into many places, and I find that the source code is available for most of the libraries from Twitter. It's either in Maven Central, because when you publish a jar, you usually also publish the sources, unless you explicitly tell it not to. For some others, the source code is in GitHub, and for some others, it might be in an obscure place where you can actually find it. But importantly, the source code is there for most of the libraries. There are a few things like BS Scala doc that I don't care about because it's only documentation. My customer is asking me to compile the project, not to provide documentation. So I'm not going to worry about that one. So I'm going to drop the 2 libraries that seem to be unnecessary. The one for testing and the one for documentation. And let's focus only on the critical ones. And gladly there are only 3. That's a lucky day. So instead of compiling every of these libraries, resolving dependencies, running SVT publish local, or using my own artifactory or publishing to Maven Central, instead of doing that, I can take a shortcut. I can copy the whole source code from each of those libraries and just put it within the project itself. That's it. That means that when I compile the actual project, the dependencies are going to be compiled as well. So no need to do publish local and that kind of things that takes time and it's annoying. So I'm going to try that. And this is what basically I did here. I felt pretty lucky at that time because the more critical library for the project was Twitter Actors, and apparently it was dependency free. So for library authors, try not to depend on too much dependencies because you might get an unlucky guy like me facing problems. So Twitter Actors, for the ones that are not familiar, basically Twitter had their own ecosystem back then. They had their own actors before Akka, before the Scala actors and everything. They had their own Scala futures, and basically this library is like part of that. So it's dependency free and that's good. Recompiling for sure is going to cause problems because I haven't added all the dependencies. Then I get to another library called Nagati. I have no idea what this actually does or what does it mean, but it's from Twitter, even though it's not at the Twitter namespace, it's from Twitter. And it has a few dependencies. But if you pay attention, these are the same dependencies that the main project is actually depending on. So that's another good thing, because if I manage to resolve those, I'm going to be able to compile this. So this is a lucky hour as well. Still errors, totally expected. Then the tier library, which is called config, no external dependencies, at least not obviously, still problems. Then turns out that the library that I actually ignored, it's necessary because they were using some kind of time class in order to be able to mock the time, what you can do with the Java clock right now. But remember, they were in Java 6. So I'm going to just copy this file, like you can see here in the screenshot. I copy only the time. I don't care about anything else. I don't care about the test. I also removed all the tests for now. Then there are many compile errors, totally expected. And now this is the time that you were expecting for, trying to fix the compile errors. First of all, thank you to the IntelliJ plugin developers, because it's amazing that IntelliJ works with the Scala 282. And that has helped quite a lot in order to use the go-to definition, to look at the documentation instead of having to do it myself. And so thank you to the IntelliJ plugin developers. And let's look at the first problem. If you remember, I have copied the whole actor library from Twitter. Still, why is the actor class not being able to be resolved? What's going on there? That doesn't look right. Well, it turns out that one of the biggest changes from Scala 2.7 and Scala 2.8 is that the import resolution or the scoping was different. Right now, you know that if you have something within the package called Twitter actors scheduler, it means that you are importing everything from the scheduler package, but that's it. With Scala 2.7.7, it was different, and with Scala 2.7 in general. If you have something at the scheduler package, you were importing the actors, the Twitter, and the com. You were importing just everything. So after I fixed a lot of files that were having that by using this syntactic sugar in order to import everything from actors and from the actual scheduler package, I changed, I'm not sure, 50 files or something to just follow this convention, and 90% of the errors are fixed. Then, there are a few other things related to the collection API. There were many changes related to the collection usage between 2.7 and 2.8. There was this helper method to create an immutable collection based on a mutable one. The method didn't exist anymore. I'm not sure why. But we can pretty easily emulate that by just doing something like this. Okay, we need an immutable collection. Let's just convert it manually, and that's it. There were not so many places to do this, and that's another way to fix the problem. Then there were another signature changes that I had to change. For example, iterable to iterator. And it's also a relatively simple change like this. Like just replace the method signatures in order to fulfill the compiler, and that's it. But then we get into something a little bit more obscure. Apparently the iterable had something that the iterator does not, which are these two methods. And normally it would have been pretty tricky to get this right, but thank you to IntelliJ, I managed to find that we have an exist method and we can do the same thing that the contains does. But the other thing, this is the obscure one. How do we emulate the next from the iterator? I could have written this myself in a worse way, very likely. But turns out that the Twitter actors library had a version that was cross-compiling to Scala 2.8 and to Scala 2.7. So I just went there and grabbed the source code and put it here. It made my job simpler because this was already tested. There was another problem related to the collection usage. If you pay a little bit of attention to the code that is here, I am not doing anything, really. I'm not doing anything, just rewriting the same thing into something more detailed. And this makes the compiler happy. And it works. We got the application compiling. For the one that we're expecting and resolve the dependency, it's not. It works. So now the time is prepare a fat jar I managed to find that SVT assembly works for 282. So that was a wonderful surprise, because just adding those few lines, I managed to build the fat jar. Then in order to try it, I have to provide a few configuration, but that's not relevant to Scala. It's just configuration for the project itself. I run it like that. Then we get the logs. Just trust me, it's working. You need to understand what's going on, but it's working. And this is using Telnet in order to issue commands, and it's working. So if you want to do something for the Scala people, please keep your dependencies up to date. We have a Scala steward, because it's pretty annoying to be dealing with these problems, especially when the artifactories are gone. We already saw the case for Vintre, we saw the case for the data binder, we saw the case for a Scala tool, something, and there are many places. And Scala compatibility between minor versions used to be very bad as well, so you are in a very good spot right now with Scala 3. Compatibility is way, way nicer than what it used to be. And if you ever had to do some kind of thing like compiling a legacy Scala application where dependencies are gone, consider pretty carefully what you are doing. Because, for example, when I went to the path of compiling SVT 072, it led nowhere. And you can waste a lot of time. And you can also try continuing to that path because you have already invested so much time into that and you don't want to actually skip and do something else. So consider carefully what you are doing, because this is annoying and it's not as simple as it should be. And that's basically. Thank you.
Thank you for the talk. It's very entertaining. I'm a bit confused that it seemed like you had to compile a very specific branch, but then you changed the implementation and also compiled with Scala 2.8, so wouldn't it be incompatible with the original requirement, or did that not matter?
Well, the requirement was to use Java 8.